Canada's newest proposed liquefied natural gas facility is the Cedar LNG terminal in Kitimat, BC. It's backed by the Haisla First Nation and, if built, will sit within its traditional territory. After Cedar recently cleared some provincial environmental hurdles, it took a step closer to reality. Crystal Smith is the chief councillor of the Haisla Nation. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with what this represents. How big a deal is it that your nation is spearheading this LNG terminal?
It is absolutely very monumental for our community. It is, it's just another step in our economic independence for future generations. It is absolutely the biggest, most transformational project that we're going to be a part of.
So obviously there are many First Nations across this land, as you know better than anyone, and some of them are opposed to various projects, and some of those in opposition to some projects actually feed into this terminal and part of a natural gas pipeline. How do you kind of explain that it is actually an appropriate role for your First Nation to be part of a steward of a project like this, rather than those who are in opposition to them?
When you think about the global context of what everybody in the world is experiencing in regards to any of the climate issues that we're seeing today, LNG is a part of that transition. The offset of coal is absolutely imperative to not only Canada, but in a global context. We truly believe that we're being a part of that solution while also lifting our Indigenous communities out of poverty through these agreements that we have with the proponents.
Do you believe it makes a difference you did get past some environmental hurdles and some people weren't sure it was going to happen? Do you think it made a difference that a First Nations was backing this? In other words, that your respect for instance, the land or the fact that it is your own land made a difference in that process?
I absolutely, truly believe that it is one of the major unique aspects of this project, that it is majority owned by Indigenous community. For the fact that while I sit here in front of you today as the elected chief councillor and representative of our nation, we have the mandate of 2,000 of our Haisla membership that are backing and supporting an industry, because we feel it's a necessary component to not only the reconciliation in this country, but also the environmental aspects. We're contributing to reducing greenhouse gases in the world and thus impacting our traditional territory.
Do you expect to see more like this? Is this just the beginning?
Yes. I mean, I'm also the chair of the First Nations LNG Alliance and advocate heavily for Indigenous participation in projects such as this. We have another proposed project for BC that is being led by the Nisga'a Nation, and would love to see another nation come behind us in terms of the success provided by that project.
It is so good to have you with us. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Crystal Smith is Chief Councillor of the Haisla Nation. One way to advance real economic prosperity for Indigenous peoples is to make sure the money follows the intent. There are now funds being put together to source capital for Indigenous projects. This is a way of linking reconciliation with economic self-determination for Indigenous groups. One of those funds is Longhouse Capital. Fred de Blasio is its co-founder and CEO. Fred, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for joining me.
So let's start with the vision for Longhouse. What are you trying to do here?
Well, we are essentially an Indigenous asset manager in the alternative asset space, and we are Indigenous founded, led, and managed, one of the first of its kind.
And how much money are you looking to raise? Can you say?
Yes, we're looking to raise $1 billion, and our focus is on infrastructure specifically.
So there's lots of opportunity, obviously, to be had, Fred. Give me the pitch to non-Indigenous investors. What's the opportunity here? How do you sell it?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, as good stewards of capital, we're seeking to generate superior risk-adjusted returns. That underpins all of our investment decisions. Additionally, we want to ensure that we make a lasting and positive impact on Indigenous communities across this country. And to that end, part of what we do is ensuring that we uptick the knowledge base and financial literacy and acumen of Indigenous people across this country through a program that we refer to as a scholarship, internship, and mentorship. So in order to be able to get onto Wall Street or Bay Street, internships are a key element of that. And we under-index at the moment as Indigenous people in finance, and our hope and expectation is through Longhouse Capital Partners, we will not only be able to access the capital, ensure that it gets delivered to communities, but also ensure that the financial literacy and acumen is raised over the course of time.
All good goals. We've heard that the government in the most recent budget could have created more supports for Indigenous financing. Is that something that you hope to see more of? In other words, that you might partner with access to government capital, especially for infrastructure, Fred? It seems like a perfect place for that.
That is certainly an opportunity. The AFN recently came out with a $349 billion infrastructure gap. Our view is that a big portion of that is government or public infrastructure. There's also a sizable proportion of that that is private infrastructure. And that's where our area of focus is. We intend to bring global capital to infrastructure situations and requirements in reserve lands across the country.
And of course, the place we've seen a lot of the focus has been on things like pipelines. Are you talking about that kind of infrastructure? Now, there's natural resource related projects, or is it the whole spectrum? Does it include, clean water on reserve? Does it include all of the infrastructure that we might consider necessary?
We're very much focused on the private infrastructure. So think transmission lines across First Nations lands that will deliver electricity to various parts of the country. That's one of the examples of what you could also consider toll roads, if we're thinking of Ring of Fire as another example.
Are there other funds like yours, Fred? Did you have a lot of competition, or is this a relatively new concept?
This is a relatively new concept, particularly where we are focused, which is the private sector infrastructure piece. There were some private equity shops, which is also considered an alternative, but we are very much focused on our lane. And I think we are pretty much one of the first in this space, certainly seeking to raise $1 billion for sure.
And do you feel good about your prospects?
We've had some incredible interest, and we feel decidedly excited about everything that's taking place. We are engaged with a whole host of players in this space, and we expect that we should be able to close on that $1 billion over the next 12 months. It's a heavy lift. It's not a small number, but the country is ready for Indigenous leadership as it relates to economic independence, and with UNDRIP, which means the land returning back to us will generate enormous wealth, and that will create unbelievable opportunities for private industry to participate in the growth of that segment, and that's good for all of Canada, and of course specifically part of economic self-determination, which is really the ultimate goal for First Nations.
It is indeed. It's great to have you with us for this, Fred. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Fred de Blasio, co-founder and CEO of Longhouse Capital. Coming up, economic prosperity can't really grow until basic needs are met, and too often for Indigenous peoples, the gap is large. That's still ahead. But first, when it comes to exploring Indigenous culture in Canada, there's an easy way for travelers to make sure they're getting the real deal. The folks at ITAC, or Indigenous Travel Association of Canada, have a designation. The original is the mark with its own symbol to make it easier to spot. It stands for authentic experiences run by or owned by Indigenous people, offering a true experience reflective of Indigenous culture. Given the current obsession with getting the best, we're guessing there will be demand for the original OG. We're back after this.